Everyone thinks Jason Statham is unbreakable. But they're wrong.
Weren't you on the British diving team?
I was on the British team for almost 10 years. It was a silly thing. I got into it really late to be, efficient in any kind of international sport.
At 58, the action star's toughest guy image is a shield for a devastating secret struggle.
Jason Statham, who's not having a good time. He's moved from 8th, slipped down to 11th.
This isn't about a bad movie or a stunt gone wrong. This is about a deep, personal heartbreak that has defined his entire life, and fans are just finding out. The man who can survive anything on screen has been quietly fighting a battle that would crush most people. Get ready, because the real Jason Statham is nothing like you think. When success becomes a cage, the cameras you see captured his strength, but they completely missed his solitude. The studios wanted explosions, not emotions. They wanted the transporter, not the man. "You do one thing too well," he once said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "and they never let you do anything else." That's putting it lightly. Beneath that joke was a whole ocean of exhaustion. And it wasn't the kind of exhaustion born from failure. It was the kind born from being trapped by your own success. He was the million-dollar man who was only allowed to do one trick. What most people don't realize is that long before the billion-dollar franchises and the screaming fans, Jason was just another hustler. He came from the rain-soaked gray streets of Shirebrook. His entire world was built on pure grit and the need to survive. He wasn't practicing lines. He was selling dodgy goods on street corners. He was diving for his country, pushing his body to the limit. He was chasing every dream that refused to stay still. And get this, even when fame finally found him, that feeling of hunger, that feeling of being one step away from losing it all, it never really left him. After Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels made his name in 1998, the lights got brighter, but the nights in a lot of ways grew darker. He would walk alone after shoots, aching in silence. Every muscle in his body didn't just carry the memory of a workout, it carried the memory of stunts that nearly took him off the map for good. But not all of Jason's scars came from car crashes or botched stunt falls. Some of the deepest ones came from love, or more specifically, from the kind of heartbreak that no amount of physical training can ever fix. Before the big headlines and the action sets, there was Kelly Brook. She was already known, her beauty the kind that made entire rooms turn and cameras linger. He, on the other hand, was still fighting just to be seen. He was the guy with the rough edges and a future that was anything but certain. Together they built a small, private world. It was a world of laughter and promises, fueled by cheap takeouts eaten on the floor of a cramped apartment. They had dreams that were way too big for those four walls. She would tease him about his endless, grueling workouts, and he would swear to her, "One day this will all be worth it." And for a time it was. But fame is a strange and jealous thing. It changes everything. His days stretched into endless filming schedules. Her life spun faster and faster under the constant glow of television lights and paparazzi flashes. They tried to hold on. They really did. But distance, as it turns in, is a lot louder than whispered words over a bad phone connection. Soon their smiles became polite, their calls turned rare, and the silence between them began to echo, filling up all the space that their laughter used to. Then came the photographs. The ones that shattered everything. It was Kelly arm in arm with actor Billy Zane. The headlines didn't just sting, they were a public announcement of his private humiliation. Jason didn't rage, he didn't seek revenge, he just went quiet. He did the only thing he knew how to do. He buried his heartbreak in motion. More hours at the gym, longer takes on set. He pushed his body until the physical pain was so loud it drowned out the emotional kind. Each bruise became a mask for the hurt he couldn't speak about. Friends noticed his absence. Reporters who asked about his love life were met with a cold, polite stare. Years later, when someone finally had the nerve to ask him about her, he just said, "We were young." Life moves faster than people do. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a faint trace of gratitude, the kind that only comes when a deep pain has finally, after years, learned to sit still. She had loved him when he had absolutely nothing, and she left him right when he was about to have everything. That was the cruel, perfect symmetry of his rise to the top. And it was the first real proof that even the toughest men, the ones who look like they're made of steel, bleed just like everyone else. Not from bullets or blows, but from memories that never truly, fully fade. He had the success, but it cost him his first love, and the price of fame was only going to get higher. The revolving door of fame. By 2005, Jason Statham was 38 years old. He was a man who had finally, against all odds, conquered the dream he once chased through London's wet, unforgiving streets. The transporter and crank had made him Hollywood's new obsession. He was the guy. Yet the applause that followed him from city to city, from one red carpet to the next, began to sound hollow. It was a loud noise that faded the second the cameras stopped rolling. Fame was great at filling rooms, but it was terrible at filling the empty spaces inside. He'd often return from a massive, glittering premiere to the suffocating quiet of a hotel wall that didn't even know his name. The silence was deafening. A year after the public split with Kelly Brook, Jason's path crossed with Sophie Monk. She was the wild, radiant Australian singer who seemed to arrive like a bolt of lightning, right when his life had gone too still and too gray. She was 26, fearless, and refreshingly, chaotically alive. The crazy part is, she was the total opposite of the quiet, focused, disciplined world he had built. She laughed loudly. She teased him relentlessly about his endless workouts and his too serious face. She had a spark that for a moment made his carefully constructed walls crumble. "You're always fighting something," she joked with him once. He just smiled and said, "That's how I stay ready." On lazy afternoons, she'd throw popcorn at him while old black and white movies flickered in the background. And for a little while, Jason wasn't an action hero. He wasn't the transporter. He was just a man, sitting on a couch, rediscovering what warmth felt like. But love, as he was learning, rarely survives the life of a man who is always on the move. It's not that simple. Jason's career was a machine that needed to be fed. It pulled him across continents. Morocco for one shoot, France for another, Los Angeles for pickups. All while Sophie's world, her music and her life, thrived back in Australia. The distance stretched tighter with each new flight, with each new time zone. Soon, words just couldn't reach across the thousands of miles of ocean. One evening in late 2006, they spoke for the last time. It wasn't a fight. There was no anger, no screaming. It was just silence. It was the soft, unmistakable collapse of something that had once been beautiful. Later, when asked about him, Sophie gave a quote that was haunting. She said, "He was the hardest man to love, not because he didn't care, but because he carried everything inside. He was a vault, and he was the only one with the key." So here's the deal. The pattern was set. The fire of that relationship was gone, and he was back to silence. By 2007, another chapter began. This time it was Alex Zosman, a London model and designer, and she was the complete opposite of Sophie. She seemed to offer the one thing Jason craved more than success. Calm. She wasn't fame. She wasn't fire. She was stillness. Their mornings smelled like coffee, not jet fuel. Their nights were filled with peace, not after parties. After years of living in pure chaos, she grounded him. He'd come home late from a long day of stunt rehearsals, kiss her on the forehead and whisper, "You make this world feel still." And for the first time in years, he almost believed it. But peace, he was discovering, rarely stays when the world demands movement. Between 2008 and 2009, Jason's schedule became something beyond brutal. The bank job, death race, Transporter 3, one after another. Cities blurred into one long gray smear. Time itself slipped through his hands like sand. Alex tried to hold on, she really did, but love needs presence, not postcards from a hotel. By 2010, they drifted apart, just as quietly as they had come together. There was no drama, no headlines. It was just two souls who were on completely different tracks. Jason once said something that explains this whole period of his life perfectly. Everyone wanted the actor. No one saw the man. Those words carry the deep, cold ache of being desired by millions but seen by no one. The hotel lights dimmed, the applause faded, and in the quiet, only his own breathing reminded him he was still there. Fame had given him everything he ever wanted, except stillness. Yet he endured, because that's what Jason Statham had always done. He just kept moving, even through the crushing quiet that always follows the storm. He thought stillness was what he wanted, but life had a new challenge in store, and her name was Rosie. Guarding the fortress. And even after enduring the fire of fast fame and the deep chill of silence, Jason Statham discovered that calm has its own battles. In 2010, at 43 years old, he met Rosie Huntington-Whiteley. She was 23, a model whose quiet, steady confidence cut right through the armor he had spent decades building. This was different. She wasn't dazzled by the fame. She wasn't impressed by the fast cars. She was drawn to the stillness she saw beneath his strength. "You don't talk much," she teased him over wine one evening. He smiled, half amused and half wary. He'd been here before. "I've said enough in bruises," he replied. From that moment, the chase was over. All the games, the posturing, the Hollywood nonsense, it was gone. It was replaced by a slow, steady warmth that grew like a dawn. Their early days weren't on red carpets. They were built from simple, quiet pleasures. Evening walks through Notting Hill. Secret grocery runs where he'd try to hide under a baseball cap. Cooking pasta in the cramped kitchen of his London flat with laughter spilling over as music played softly in the background. For the first time in years, Jason wasn't a stuntman. He wasn't a star. He wasn't a symbol of survival. He was just a man, breathing beside someone who made the world feel alive again. "You make me feel alive," he told her once, and she knew he meant it. By 2016, their love had endured. It had survived the gossip, the 20-year age gap headlines, and the relentless demands of Hollywood. At 49 and 29, they got engaged. It happened under a soft Malibu sunset, and their commitment was just like them, understated, deliberate. It was a promise built on patience, not on spectacle. A year later, their son, Jack Oscar, was born. And for a moment, Jason Statham felt the entire world slow down. He cradled him, marveling at the smallness of life. He realized in that moment that the one fight he never ever wanted to lose was the one to keep this new piece intact. But here's the deal. The machine of fame shows no mercy. It doesn't care that you're a new father. Filming for Mechanic, Resurrection, and The Fate of the Furious wasn't just down the street, it pulled him across continents, leaving Rosie at home to balance new motherhood and her own massive career. This became the new secret struggle. He had it all. A loving partner, a beautiful child, and he was never there. He saw first steps over a screen. He heard first words over a bad connection. He celebrated birthdays via FaceTime, singing to a phone in a lonely hotel room thousands of miles away. These were the moments he longed to hold, but he couldn't. Rosie would leave handwritten notes in his suitcase for him to find. "Come home soon. We love you." Those nights, alone in generic five-star hotel rooms, were a new kind of hard. They reminded him that even this perfect love, this real love, required a patience that his career rarely afforded him. In 2022, their daughter Isabella James arrived. A second heartbeat in the home, a second powerful reminder of what truly mattered. Holding her, Jason understood something. He understood that no premiere, no paycheck, and no death-defying stunt could ever match the simple, heavy gravity of being home. By 2025, at 58, he and Rosie lived mostly in London. They were far from Hollywood's blinding glare. His mornings now smelled like pancakes and crayons. His evenings hummed with the sound of laughter, not headlines. He no longer chased fame. He no longer posted updates. He just protected. He protected the fragile, beautiful world he had fought so long and so hard to build. But even peace, he knew, carried its own shadows. After a lifetime of living in storms, Jason Statham knows that love, just like life itself, is a delicate thing. He knows that some battles are won not by fighting, but by guarding what matters most. But peace, as Jason was about to learn, never lasts. It's just the quiet moment before the next storm hits. Brothers in Speed. Even when life finally seemed to offer some quiet, Jason Statham was about to learn a brutal lesson. Peace can come with dark, heavy shadows. It was 2011. The set of The Expendables 2 in Bulgaria. The day began like any other. Blue skies stretched over the mountains. Cameras were rolling. Laughter bounced between the actors and the crew during breaks. Jason was rehearsing a complex chase scene by a lake. Alongside him was Kun Liu, a 26-year-old stuntman from China. Kun looked up to Jason. He saw him as the pinnacle of success. "One day," Kun said, his eyes bright with ambition, "I'll be where you are." Jason just smiled, completely unaware that this ordinary day would carve a wound so deep that no amount of applause could ever heal it. The scene involved a planned explosion on a rubber boat. The timing had to be perfect, down to the millisecond. The explosion came just seconds too early. The roar tore through the air. It wasn't a movie sound, it was a sound that ripped through reality itself. Jason saw the flash, the plume of smoke, the instant chaos. And then, silence. A raw, merciless silence. People ran. Screams echoed off the water, and in the middle of it all, Kun Liu was gone. That night, alone in his trailer, Jason replayed the disaster. Over and over, the timing, the steps, the flash of light. He couldn't stop. "You think you're invincible," he admitted years later, his voice low, "until you see someone pass away doing what they love." From that exact moment, stunts were no longer just a performance for him. They were risks. They were risks paid in flesh. He trained harder. He smiled for the cameras. But the weight of what he had seen, the weight of that young man's ambition, settled in his eyes and never left. The set was shut down. Production was halted. But the machine, as always, started up again. He had to finish the movie. He had to keep going. But he was different. A part of him was left in that lake in Bulgaria. Then, just 2 years later, while filming Fast and Furious 7 in 2013, Jason discovered a light in the middle of all that grief. At the heart of that light was Paul Walker. Paul was 40 years old and was warmth itself. He was a man whose presence could make even the most cynical person believe in goodness. Jason entered the Fast and Furious family as the new guy, the villain. Yet Paul welcomed him instantly. He threw an arm around his shoulder, teased him between takes, and sent him late-night videos just to spark a laugh. Off camera, they would talk for hours. They talked about cars, about family, about their charity work. They talked about finding a purpose beyond the fame. "You do what you love," Paul told him one evening, "but you live for what you give." Those words stuck with Jason forever. They were a guiding light in the often dark and shallow world of Hollywood. Then, November 30th arrived. A quiet Saturday in Santa Clarita turned into a global tragedy. Paul Walker, leaving a charity event for typhoon victims, was lost in a fiery car crash. The news didn't just hit the set, it shattered it. The laughter, the light, the very heart of the Fast family vanished in an instant. Jason went to the memorial silently. He stood among thousands, his head bowed, tears flowing for the man who in such a short time had become his brother. Filming afterward was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do. It felt like chasing a ghost. Every engine roar, every scripted smile just echoed Paul's absence. How do you pretend to fight a man who is no longer there? How do you find the energy to perform when your heart is broken? You don't move on from a man like Paul, Jason reflected later. You carry his light. You carry his light wherever you go. Since that day, danger on a set has taken on a new meaning for Jason. Explosions, car crashes, and high-flying stunts are no longer just cool cinematic moments. They are stark, terrifying reminders of the lives that didn't get to return home. He works with his teams more closely. He insists on safer sets. He honors the craft as something sacred, something that demands respect. At night, he sometimes awakens from dreams filled with smoke and chaos. He checks on his children. He whispers a quiet thank you to fate. He knows better than anyone that all the countless fights he's won on screen cannot match the one he fights within. The battle between survival, deep sorrow, and the human heart. Every explosion eventually ends in silence. And in that silence, he remembers the ones who didn't come back. But what happens when the toughest man on screen realizes the real fight isn't in the arena, but within his own body? The Black Sea Secret. For decades, he waged a silent war. It wasn't against bad guys, it was against his own body. Every bruise, every fracture, every torn ligament was a testament, a little receipt for the high cost of his craft. It all began in 2002. He made a choice. While other actors were in their trailers, he chose to take every fall, every punch, and every plunge himself. From the transporter to crank, Jason made pain a part of the performance. What most people don't realize is what that means. It means diving through real shattered glass, even if it's sugar glass, it cuts. It means fighting on top of a moving vehicle at 60 miles an hour. It means rolling down a concrete staircase until his skin burned and his bones rattled. Fellow stuntmen, the toughest guys in the business, admired him for it. Doctors warned him he was playing a dangerous game. That's the job, he'd laugh, brushing off their concerns. Behind that grin, however, his body was aching. Sleep became a luxury he often couldn't afford. By the time he hit his 40s, the toll was undeniable. It wasn't just sore muscles. Years of relentless, high-impact stunts had left his spine compressed. His joints were screaming. His body was riddled with microfractures that never had a chance to properly heal. Yet he refused to stop. He couldn't. "You don't rest," he once told a friend. "You just recover fast enough to get hurt again." Films came and went. The Mechanic, Parker, Safe. Each one demanded more from a body that was already pushed to its absolute limits. Then, in 2014, The Expendables 3 almost claimed him. It was in Bulgaria, a hot summer noon by the Black Sea. Jason was behind the wheel of a massive 3-ton truck for a stunt. It was a stunt he, of course, insisted on doing himself. The engines roared, the cameras rolled, and for a single perfect heartbeat, everything was going exactly as planned. Until the brakes failed. He hit the pedal. Nothing, just nothing. The pedal went straight to the floorboard. The truck, now a 3-ton piece of unstoppable metal, lurched toward the end of the pier. It smashed through the concrete barrier like it was paper. The world flipped, glass shattered, water surged. He was plunging 60 feet straight down into the dark, cold waters of the Black Sea. He fought through the initial shock and chaos. The cab was filling with water, cold, dark, and fast. He was trapped, his seatbelt jammed. His lungs were on fire. He thought of home. He thought of Rosie's smile. He thought of his son Jack, who wasn't even born yet. Instinct took over where fear had frozen him. He was an Olympic-level diver, but this wasn't diving. This was raw survival. He ripped at the belt. He forced the door open against the crushing weight of the water. He broke through the surface, gasping for air. Alive, trembling, soaked. He had faced mortality, and for today he had survived. From that day on, the game was different. Stunts were no longer risks paid in blood, they were risks paid in borrowed time. Pain became his constant companion, a dull hum beneath every muscle. Yet he endured. He kept training, kept fighting, kept moving forward. Younger stuntmen on his sets watched him, wide-eyed, completely unaware of the quiet, agonizing toll he was paying. In private, his mind would go back to the Black Sea, back to that moment of silence under the water where his courage met his mortality. Now, in 2025, at 58, the silver at the edges of his hair is a little more pronounced. The memory of every fall is etched in his body. But Jason Statham still carries that fire. It's smaller maybe, tempered by time, but it's unbroken. On set, he brings that same intensity. But it's also a reminder to everyone watching that the real battles, the ones that define you, are not fought in the middle of explosions. They are fought in the silence, within your own body, and against time itself. He once said, "I used to fight villains. Now I fight gravity," and that has always been the simple, heartbreaking truth. But what was he like before the fame, before the heartbreak and the near misses? The answer is the key to everything. The phone call that changed it all. No spotlight ever shone on the place where Jason Statham first learned how to survive. Born on July 26, 1967, in Shirebrook, Derbyshire, he grew up in a world of gray. It was a world of coal smoke, cracked windows, and nights that seemed longer than hope. His father, Barry, was a man who worked from dawn until dusk. He did whatever it took. He was a miner, a painter, a seller of trinkets, and a singer in local pubs. His mother, Eileen, was a dancer chasing fleeting applause. Childhood for Jason was not a luxury. It was a lesson. By 12, he had found another kind of discipline, a painful one. He was diving at the Crystal Palace National Sports Center. He would push his body through the pain, the bruises, and the bone-deep exhaustion. He was chasing perfection while the janitor waited to shut off the lights. What most people don't realize is the wow factor of this. He spent 12 years on the British National Diving Squad. 12 years of climbing a 10-meter platform that's 33 feet, the height of a 3-story building, and hitting cold water at over 30 miles per hour. Winter after winter, he would climb back to the board, his hands raw, his muscles screaming. He was learning in the most brutal way possible that endurance was always stronger than talent. In 1990, he represented England at the Commonwealth Games. It was a massive achievement, but 2 years later, he missed making the Olympic team by a single, heartbreaking place. He was left staring at the still blue water, realizing that strength wasn't born from victory. It was forged in the bitter sting of struggle. London in the early 90s was merciless. His diving career was over. He was in his 20s with no job and no prospects. So he did what his father taught him. He hustled. He sold cheap perfume and dodgy jewelry on the rain-slick streets of London. He slept wherever he could. He survived on the same grit that his father had instilled in him. His nights were spent training alone in small, damp gyms. He'd do push-ups and shadowbox against the ghosts of his own failure. He was forging a toughness that no applause could ever validate. Then a break. A modeling agent from sports promotions spotted him. It wasn't his smile. It was his face. His face looked like it had lived. Soon he was modeling for Tommy Hilfiger, Levi's, and French Connection. But this wasn't fame. This was just a foothold. It was a way to pay the bills. Destiny finally arrived in 1998 in the form of a phone call. A young director named Guy Ritchie was casting a low-budget movie called Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Ritchie wasn't looking for an actor. He was looking for truth. He had heard about the real-life street vendor, and he wanted him. Jason's grit, his silence, and his lived-in experience became his performance. Snatch followed. And then, The Transporter in 2002 turned him into an international star. He trained relentlessly, adding Wing Chun, Krav Maga, and kickboxing to his arsenal. He performed every single stunt himself. He came home bruised, torn, but relentless. From Crank to The Expendables, from Fast and Furious 7 to The Meg, his name became synonymous with action. But behind every blockbuster, behind every massive paycheck was the quiet war his body was fighting. Every scar was a reminder of the streets he survived, the dives he endured, and the battles he had fought long before any camera was ever rolling. Through all the bruises, the flops, the box office triumphs, and the relentless soul-crushing travel, Jason Statham carried the same fire. It was the fire he learned in Shirebrook. The fire that taught him that survival is earned, resilience is forged, and the man underneath the fame is still and will always be the boy who learned how to rise again and again. So what do you think? Is Jason Statham's greatest role the tough guy, or the man who's hiding all the pain? Let us know. Like and subscribe.